Legend of Total War here, and today I thought I'd do something really stupid and ask Grok some questions about how to get good at Total War Warhammer 3 campaigns. Uh, you know, I go on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days, every now and again, and just about on every post, there's always someone like, on the very first reply, "Hey Grok, explain this to me in the simplest way possible." It's like every single post. So I thought, you know what? Let's drop our IQ down a little bit and let's ask Grok some questions here. So I'm going to start with how to get good at Total War Warhammer 3 single player campaign. I'm going to make that distinction there so that we're not talking about multiplayer whatsoever. I think with asking the AI question, putting as making it as specific as possible is better. Otherwise, it'll just start assuming you're talking about multiplayer as well. And we'll see what they say. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll read through it and I'll say what I agree or disagree with. I imagine for the most part what it does is just basically searches the internet and just finds guides from everywhere and just sort of compiles whatever gets like the most updates. And we'll just see what is the sort of the overwhelming prevailing myth, or whether or not it's actually really good. We'll see. Now, obviously, I'm not an authority on all of this stuff here. I obviously have proven that I do all right with Total Warhammer 3 campaigns. And I'm sure many people will disagree with a lot of my advice. But usually the disagreements come down to I don't like playing that way. Not that it isn't actually good. And that's totally fine as well. But let's just be clear about what we're talking about. If you want to have fun with Total Warhammer 3, just play however you want. You don't need a guide for that. Just, play on a low... Basically, if you just want to have fun and you're not looking to be good at the game, just play the way you want to play, and then just adjust the difficulty to where the game is like playable based on how you're playing. Like if you want to build balanced armies and you're trying to play on legendary difficulty and you can't win the campaign, then don't play on legendary difficulty. Just knock it down to like hard or normal or something like that. And then when the campaign feels a lot more like an actual game rather than an uphill grind that's boots like squashing down on you, then you found the right difficulty for you. And if you want to then get good, you'll have to adjust how you do it or get very good at what you're trying to do because it's inefficient, but whatever. All right, let's read this out. So it says, to get good at Total Warhammer 3 single-player campaign, you need to master a mix of strategic campaign management, tactical battlefield skills, and faction-specific mechanics. Below is a concise, actionable guide to improve your gameplay based on effective strategies and common player advice. Common map strategies. Understand your faction. Each faction has unique mechanics, strengths, and weaknesses. Study your faction's campaign mechanics, e.g. Skaven Empire, Cathay's Harmony, or Chaos Rifts. Chaos Rifts. Probably talking about the Realms of Chaos campaign, right? Nah, just ignore that. You're not going to play the Realms of Chaos campaign. Check in-game tooltips or guides on platforms like Total War's subreddit or Steam community for specifics. Okay, so tooltips in-game can actually be incorrect. So you got to keep in mind that Total War Warhammer 3 is basically been like a work in progress game for the better part of a decade. And it has been patched and patched and patched and patched, right? There is some legacy tooltips in there that belong in Total War Warhammer 1 that are still present in some situations in Total War Warhammer 3. And sometimes these things just don't ever get updated. I'll give you a couple of examples. So if you hover over the tooltip for increasing campaign movement range, it'll then bring up another tooltip that says that the campaign map movement range of any army cannot be increased beyond 50% of its base, which is just 100% incorrect and has never been correct in Total Warhammer 1, 2, or 3. You are totally able to go beyond 150 move points. I've seen armies that have gone up to 200 or more. The only limiting factors is that there's just a limited number of things you can do to boost campaign movement range, but you can definitely go beyond 50%. So yeah, that tooltip is like just completely wrong. There's just no truth to it whatsoever. And another one, just going back to that one. Conversely, if you hover over the one that says casualty replenishment rate caps out at 50%. That is absolutely correct. That is the cap for replenishment rate. You cannot replenish faster than 50% per turn, with the exception of Beastmen during a moon event. They can actually replenish more than they can replenish their entire army in a single end turn. That's like one example of it though, and that's due to an event. So The other example in terms of Total War Warhammer 1 tooltip, this is very rare. You're very unlikely to encounter unless... yeah, like I said, unlikely. So if you're playing as dwarfs, for example, and then you encounter a Khornate faction or Beastman faction that has caused a ruin nearby and that ruin is not able to be occupied, either was recently blown up by Khorne or the Beastmen have a herdstone and they've completed their Mark of Ruination or whatever it's called, and you just can't colonize it. If you put the tooltip over that settlement when playing as the dwarves, it'll say you can only colonize settlements that belong to greenskins or dwarf ruins. Now, that was true back in Total War Warhammer 1, because the way that game worked is there was no climate system. At the very beginning of the campaign, very beginning of the game in Total War Warhammer 1, there was dwarfs, greenskins, vampire counts, and the Empire. Bretonnia was there as well, but they weren't playable. And basically, the Vampire Count territory and the Empire territory were all considered one group, and then the Greenskin and Dwarf settlements were all considered another group. And the Dwarfs and Greenskins couldn't occupy Empire-Vampire territories, and vice versa. So if you attacked one of those settlements, all you could do was blow it up. And people hated it. One of the most common mods to download during Warhammer 1 was basically you can occupy anywhere mod. And so in Warhammer 2, one of the first things they developed was making a climate system so that you can occupy any settlement that you want. It's just that some are going to be less profitable than others, and some are going to be very detrimental, like the red territories. And so you've got climate preferences, which is a much better system. But anyway, it's just an indication of an old tooltip that just exists within legacy code. So just be wary that sometimes the tooltips aren't quite correct. What you want to do is just observe how the game actually functions rather than what the game tells you it functions, because the game does lie to you in many ways. And distinguishing when it tells you the truth and when it doesn't tell you the truth can be difficult. So then it says, play to your faction's strengths, e.g. High Elves excel at diplomacy and trade, while Orcs thrive on aggression and constant battles. Yes, not so much. So all factions thrive on aggression and constant battles. There really aren't any factions that you don't want to be aggressive and doing constant battles, because if you're not doing constant battles, it means they're just sitting around doing nothing, which means your enemies are building up fighting someone else, and you could end up with a problem later on. So it just depends on how you look at it. The thing is, I think it's largely thinking about the economy. So orcs, and didn't even spell orcs correctly, that's the 40k orcs. So the greenskins, they get a lot of their income through loot money. Same thing with Khorne. Whereas dwarves and high elves, they don't make a lot of money through loot. They make it through building and trade and that kind of stuff. So I think that's where it's really coming at there. But all factions need to be aggressive in terms of projecting your will on the map. It doesn't mean necessarily getting 50 territories by turn 10, but it means doing as much as you can in the time that you have. Don't sit around being like, well, my army's fine, I'm full strength, I'm going to just leave it here in the city. No army should be sitting in a settlement doing nothing for any more than one turn, and should only be there to maintain public order, basically. You need to be doing stuff every single turn. So every faction needs to be being aggressive. That's if you want to be good at it, obviously. If you don't want to, you want to sit around on your ass, that's up to you. Then economy management. Prioritize income buildings early, especially in safe provinces. For most factions, tier 1 to 2 incomes provide a steady gold. Yes, this is completely correct. Prioritize income buildings early. There are many factions where you'll actually have like a military building built in your starting capital, and it's usually better to demolish that building and build your income building. Some factions will have 1 income building, some will have 2, some will have 3, depending on whether there's like a tradable resource there. So yeah, getting the income in earlier, that gives you a really good return on investment, because you usually get that money back pretty quickly and you can reinvest that into getting more units. Now, a military building might seem good on paper because you want to get better units, but those better units usually come at an increased cost. And so since every faction in the game can recruit units just from their base settlement, you're actually better off getting more troops. You'll be stronger overall if you have more crappy troops than elite troops early on. So for example, let's just say hypothetically you could do this, which you can't, but let's just say hypothetically you can. If you were to start your campaign and you had the ability to recruit any unit that you wanted, but you didn't have unlimited budget, and you're playing as I don't know, Dark Elves, let's use as an example. And you're like, cool, I'm going to recruit 2 Black Dragons because that's all I can afford. And that's my army. I'm going to go in, haha, what are you going to do, early game High Elves? I've got 2 dragons. Well, your 2 dragons are going to die in that battle because they've got 1,000 archers and 500 spearmen or whatever, and your dragons don't have that much killing potential that quickly. And so they're going to get shot out of the sky, even against non-armor piercing missiles. And so elite units as a baseline will not carry you against overwhelming odds on their own. So you got to take their upkeep cost into consideration as well. Build defensive structures, e.g. walls, and border settlements to deter invasions. No, not really. Okay. This is definitely a noob trap, and I wouldn't have expected Grok to have gotten this. In fact, a lot of players don't understand this. Typically speaking, you don't really want to build defensive structures, except in like very rare circumstances. So, for example, when playing as dwarfs, yeah, you can build defensive structures, sure, because their garrisons are quite good. But many factions have really quite terrible garrisons. But also, there's this weird freaking thing that happens with the game, and it shouldn't do this, but it does, where in any defensive settlement, when you're getting attacked at there, you get a bit of an auto-resolve boost. The AI takes that into consideration before it launches the attack. So therefore, it brings a bigger force than it actually needs to win the battle. And if it didn't bring a bigger force than it needs, it usually tries to starve you out, at which point your garrison's going to get starved out because you're not going to be able to sally out against them. You lose the defensive advantage. So sometimes a defensive structure, like a minus armor battle, can help you overcome an overwhelming enemy, depending on how you tactically position yourself. Another thing is that if you build defense, because you've got to understand how the AI functions, this is pretty much in all difficulties, is that the AI are cowards. They don't want to lose battles for nothing. And they're more than happy to win a pointless battle that serves no strategic goal just to screw over the player a little bit. So they're happy to sack a valuable settlement, even if it costs them their entire army, as long as they're actually able to succeed. So if you have, let's just say, 20 settlements, and your army's on one side of the empire, and one border of yours isn't protected, so you put defensive structures there, what the AI is likely to do is either come at your settlements with like 2 full stacks, so your defensive structure it basically just slowed them down a little bit. Or if they don't do that, they'll actually just ignore those settlements and just go further deep in and go for your undefended settlements, which will be even more annoying because the defensive structures are taking up a build slot, making those settlements less economically viable. So what you want to do instead is leave your settlements as weak as possible in terms of the garrisons, because garrisons are fucking useless. You can't do that much with them, with the exception of Kislev, which can actually sally out with them in some cases with Adamants. So they've done a good job with Kislev with that. But yeah, there's another tactical approach that works a lot better. Whereas what you want to do is leave a small border force available to protect your frontier. Basically, if you're fighting multiple wars, as an example, so you've got you've got one war on one side of your faction, the other, another war on the other side, and you've disproportionately, and you should do this, disproportionately allocate your forces to deal with these factions. As in, you're sending 90% of your force or 80% of your force to crush your weakest enemy or the most dangerous enemy or the most profitable to conquer their territory. So your aggressive war is going on over there. But on the other side, because you've left no forces over there or minimal forces, it's a defensive war. They're attacking you. So what you want to do instead is lure the enemy into traps. And so you take whatever small force that you have that wouldn't be able to handle what invasions are coming and hide them in positions that are not favorable for the enemy. So lure them in, put your army into ambush stance behind the garrisons. So they come in thinking, oh yeah, easy win. They go and attack. And as soon as they've made the attack, your army springs out and it's suddenly a winnable fight. But again, you have to adjust depending on what you're going up against. Try to trick them wherever possible, especially when they're being aggressive and you're not able to counter them on a fair engagement. But yeah, building defensive structures can actually be quite detrimental, and you should only do that sparingly. And like settlements that like if, for example, if there's a choke point where they cannot get past it, they have to go through the settlement. Like they have to go through a mountain pass and the zone of control of that settlement controls the mountain pass and they have to go through it. Then yeah, you can build a defensive structure in that sort of territory. But if you've got wide open plains and there's multiple entries into the location, building defensive structures isn't really going to save you much, because it gives you like 2 or 3 additional units, and it's just going to be like, well, instead of having 0% chance of victory, I've now got 5% chance of victory, and they're usually quite expensive to build. You're better off investing in mobile military forces that can actually go in and deliver pain to the enemy. Even if that's only a small army, you can still annoy the hell out of the enemy by having them chase after a small army and just lure them away into the wilderness or towards an ally or something like that. Then it says, avoid overexpanding early. Consolidate 1 to 2 provinces before pushing out to prevent overextension and rebellions. Yeah and no. Yes and no. Like, overexpanding early, it depends on how you look at it. So overexpanding largely is a matter of how many enemies you have, not how many territories you have, although the two can be quite related. So what you want to do is don't have your sphere of influence be too wide too early, as in don't go out discovering too many hostile factions. So for example, if you're playing as Kislev, don't send a scout to go north to go meet Daddy as early as possible, because you'll also go and meet every hostile force out there. A faction cannot declare war on you if they don't know you exist. So at the beginning of a campaign for Katarine, for example, she can only be declared war on by like Azazel and Throt and with Azag. But as soon as you discover Arabal, he's going to declare war on you. It's going to happen no matter what, but you can delay it. So yeah, this is mostly correct. It just depends on how you want to go about it. It's more about not ending up going into too many wars too early. But you definitely want to be always in a war. Don't ever sit around being like, well, I'm at peace. This is great. No, you really shouldn't do that. I mean, unless you have absolutely no enemies on your border, which that shouldn't happen in the early stage of the campaign. If there is a faction that hasn't declared war on you yet, but they're like minus 100 relations, try to get somebody else to go to war with them first, or wait until they're at war with someone else and then declare war on them. So try to find whoever is in the worst position to fight you, that hates you, and fight them. So be aggressive, even if that means overexpanding, even if that means an overextension and rebellion. Because what you can do is, if you've got a bunch of territory that you just can't hold on to, sell it. Sell to someone else for friendship and coins and whatever. The point is to destroy your potential enemy as early as possible, so that you can then reallocate your forces elsewhere. Because if you sell some territory to pretty much anyone, you can sell them for a lot of money if you build a military structure there first. You can get a lot of treaties and also be quite friendly with them. So instead of having an enemy on that particular border, you've now got a friend, which allows you to have a smaller front line frontier, I suppose, of your potential, where your enemies can attack you from. The last thing that you want in the early stage of the campaign is enemies coming from all sides. So be aggressive. Take out the ones on certain borders first, secure, so you don't ever have to have, like, for example, playing as Kislev, take out Azag as early as possible so that you can just leave your southern border completely safe. Sometimes I give it to Dryka, sometimes I try to take Dryka out. Just depends on the situation. Diplomacy. Secure non-aggression pacts or trade agreements with neighbors to focus on one front at a time. Pretty much what I just said there. So yes, that is absolutely correct there. But like I said, selling settlements can actually be really handy. Some people see selling settlements as cheese, but the game allows you to do it. And it's just really good to do. And the thing is, especially in the early stage of the campaign, like having a minor settlement, like one minor settlement in a province, there's other settlements are controlled by other factions. Like, it doesn't really have that much value to you. You have a look at the income, it's like it's making 100 gold per turn. Build a military structure, sell it for 10 grand, or swap it for a settlement that you do want, or get a military alliance out of it. Because later down the track, you might be able to borrow one of their armies for free upkeep because you sold them a settlement a long time ago. There's a lot of things that you can do with selling territory. But yeah, don't get rigid and be like, I have to hold on to every single bit of land at all costs. No, you don't need to do that. Most of the land, and especially in the early stage of the campaign, is not really that important. Avoid unnecessary wars by checking faction relations. Hover over faction diplomacy into the screen. Yep, absolutely. You do not need to go to war with factions that are in like the green friendliness, unless of course you're not reliable, which case you've already fucked up if you're in the early stage of the campaign. No matter who you play as, you do not want to get unreliable, because yeah, friendly factions will declare war on you if you are super unreliable. Use diplomacy to weaken enemies, like bribing factions to join wars against your rivals. I would avoid bribing anyone. What you want to be doing is getting bribed, okay? You want them to be bribing you, sort of. So don't give, because your money is worth less to them than their money, right? and you can kind of use it to your advantage. Like if you want to get a non-aggression pact for someone and they're like -5, you usually have to give them a hell of a lot of money. But if they're like +5 with you, it's like, yeah, they really want a non-aggression pact, they usually won't give you that much money for it. So try to avoid giving money for treaties unless there's just no other options. Instead, try to give treaties for treaties. Like if you really want a military alliance and they're like, oh, you have to give us 15 grand for it, maybe give them a settlement, or why don't you offer to join war, or you can even offer to cancel military access with another ally or something like this, one that they might hate. But yeah, try to avoid bribing. It's not very effective. Unless you're, of course, you're ridiculously rich, in which case go for it. But yeah, that can be really ineffective. Unless it's like you only need to cover like a tiny little bit. Like it's like you offer a treaty and it's like -0.1. It's like, yeah, just chuck them a few bucks. It's fine. Campaign movement. Use the encamp stance to replenish armies and avoid ambushes in hostile territory. Yes, that is correct. Yep, that's true. Scout with single lord armies or heroes to reveal enemy movements without risking your main force. I'm impressed that it said single lord armies. That's actually a really viable thing. I do that sometimes. What I'll do is if I'm going to send an army, if I'm going to invade and I don't know what the hell I'm dealing with, especially when dealing with Skaven because they lie in ambush all the time, what you want to do, if you don't have access to heroes, you've always got access to a new lord, as long as you've got money. You recruit a lord the turn before you want to invade, and then you just like force march that lord as far as they possibly can, just to reveal as much territory as possible. They'll either get ambushed, in which case, oh no, I got ambushed, whatever. You fight the battle manually, you'll lose, but the lord will survive. But if you auto-resolve, he'll die. And it just reveals what's going on, and then you just disband him. So it just sends him back home, and then just do the same thing again the next turn if it's not viable to go attack. But yeah, using scouts like that can be really handy. Because yeah, a lot of heroes are not... You're either capped because you very early on you can't get that very many of them, or they require a tier 2 or tier 3 structure to recruit. And some factions just don't get early access to heroes, and some factions do. So yeah, using a single lord army to do that. I'm actually quite impressed that Grok said that, because that is quite an advanced technique, I think, anyway. Plan your expansion based on climate suitability. Visibility is in the settlement to avoid penalties. No! Wrong! Wrong. False. That is not what you should do. Plan your expansion based on who hates you, not based on climate. Okay? If you're conquering territory and it's red territory, sell it. Somebody wants it. Okay? Build a military structure. It'd probably only take 1 or 2 turns, and sell it. You'll make bank. What you want to do is plan your expansion based on people who hate you, because they will declare war on you, regardless of whether the climate is good for you or them or not. So take them out before they try to take you out. Or what they'll do is they'll wait for a moment where your armies have moved elsewhere, and they'll go in for that sweet, sacked your one settlement. Haha, I destroyed barely anything, but it still ruined your city sort of thing. So plan your expansion based on whoever... Like if war is inevitable, then fight it when it's at your favor, not theirs. Don't worry about the climate suitability. If you don't want to keep the settlements, sell them or abandon them. But the most important thing is demolish your enemy. Like, show no mercy, pummel them into the ground so hard that they'll either never recover because they're dead, or that they're just unlikely to like pose a threat anytime soon, like blow up their capital or something like that, if it is red climate territory. The faction that comes to mind with this is Teclis, because his initial enemy is Zinch, Kairos Fateweaver. His territory is red. So what are you going to do in this situation based on this? Well, Grok said not to plan my expansion based on climate suitability, so I'm going to go north and attack Tlaqua. No, don't do that. You need to go over and get rid of Teclis. Teclis needs to go over there and get rid of Kairos. You don't have a choice in the matter. You can't just wait for Oxyotl to do everything. You have to go deal with it. So go over there, kill that fucking bird, get some KFC, and then if you want to keep it, maybe you can manage it. It'll cost you a fair bit, or just sell it all to Oxyotl for a premium price. And swap settlements around, whatever. You can use them as a bank for quite a while with that, and then you can. When you don't have when you don't have hostile forces on your border that you're actually concerned about, then you can start planning your expansion based on climate suitability, or more importantly, strategic suitability. So you want to be securing borders, make sure your borders are as narrow as possible. So securing like mountain passes so that there's fewer entries into your empire, that's more important. Like, sure, making money is good, but reducing your costs by fighting fewer enemies, that's better. Okay, so then Lord and Hero Management. Recruit heroes early for campaign map utility, block army, wound enemy heroes, or steal technology. Okay, so yes and no. If you're going to be doing this kind of stuff, especially on Legendary difficulty, it largely depends on your own personal playstyle, whether or not you're willing to save scum. I personally have no problem with doing that, but obviously in my Let's Plays, I don't do it because people are like, oh my god, he's quick save, quick load, I'm out of here. That's totally fine. You're allowed to have that opinion. So just depends. If you're going to have the opinion of I'm never going to quick save or quick load based on unfavorable random dice chances, then don't build your heroes based on around agent actions because you're going to have a lot of failures. 95% success rate, fails, critical fail. Hero wounded for 5 turns, can't recruit a new one, that kind of stuff. You want to be recruiting heroes and putting them into your armies. Or using them as scouts, because that's the best way to get them trained up. They'll level up a lot quicker fighting larger armies than they will going up against like settlements and using agent actions. Steal technology can be all right in the early stages of the campaign, especially now that that technology points get banked, as previously it wasn't. Like in the early stages before, doing that was not very valuable, unless you did it with like 5 heroes, which you wouldn't have access to. You just wouldn't have enough. Blocking armies, that's really bloody useful. But again, it depends on a number of factors. For one thing, the higher level your hero, the more the higher the cost is going to be to do that. The higher level the enemy character that you're trying to block, the lower your success chances are going to be. So this can get prohibitively expensive if you don't have a very good economy. So just got to keep these sort of things in mind. Best way to wound an enemy hero is to actually fight them in battle and kill them so they're dead forever, as opposed to just wounded for 5 turns. But again, if they're level 20, they're immortal. Invest in blue skills for... Oh my god, here we go. Here's some noob shit right here. Invest in blue skills for lords, e.g. lightning strike for defensive battles, or upkeep reduction before specializing in combat or magic. This was Warhammer 2 mindset. In Warhammer 3, no, I don't really agree with this very much. It depends on the scenario. There are some cases, like, for example, the Empire, where maybe you would want to do this, but in most other cases, probably not. The only time you'd really want to get Lightning Strike is if you're expecting to go up against Greenskins early on, because Greenskins, a major Greenskin faction, because if they call a war, you're definitely going to want Lightning Strike for that, because you can bypass their war armies if you Lightning Strike. Of course, it exhausts your armies, like fatigue by doing that. Costs a lot of points to get 2 Lightning Strikes, so it's not cheap. And there's oftentimes quite a lot of really good skills in there, like their magic line, if they've got access to magic, in the red line to boost your entire army, or even just making that lord particularly strong, if that is what is going to provide a lot of value for it. But yeah, using this as a blanket, I always put them in the blue lines. No, another thing as well is that this provides no advantage to you if you are the one getting attacked. So if you're always attacking, then yeah, it's fine. But if you're sometimes defending, then it's no good. So yeah, not great advice. Upkeep cost reduction, that again was better in Warhammer 2 because the upkeep cost reduction was higher in that, because it would like reduce the upkeep cost by like 15%. But now it's a little bit less. It's like caps at like 9 or 10% depending on the faction or the hero or whatever. And that's largely because the supply lines is not as severe as it was in Warhammer 2 on the higher difficulties. So yeah, I would not prioritize this that much. Also, when you've got an early game campaign, your army is usually comprised of pretty low tier units, and so you're reducing the upkeep costs on cheap units by not very much. Later down the track, when using more elite units, by all means reduce upkeep costs, but by that stage your economy should be really booming anyway, unless something has gone very wrong. But anyway, I would not agree with this. I don't think that's good advice at all. Equip lords with strong items from battles or missions. Check the followers tabs for bonuses. Yeah, this just largely depends on luck, because sometimes you can be turn 42 and have nothing. Daniel, dickhead demon prince. So it just depends. Like, if you don't have a armor of destiny by turn 50, tough luck. This is how it is. But also, as for like the unique items, it's not always in your best interest to go and get those unique items to do the quest battles. Like, well, I'm in 3 wars, but I can go and get Galmaraz now. Go and fight Galmaraz. Well, I lost half my army. Anyway, time to go fight Grom the Paunch. Not really a good idea. Just be like, well, I've lost half my army, but at least I've got Galmaraz. Not going to save your ass in this situation here. However, like if you're playing as Tyrion, there's usually quite a lot of wiggle room where there's not much going on. So doing his Sunfang quest battle is really good, because that provides a pretty big global bonus to public order. I mean, Galmaraz does provide bonus to public order as well, but it's only +1 compared to +3. Just depends on what you need, and predict how many battles you're going to be in the next couple of turns before you do that. I know this one here isn't mentioning unique items in general, but since it did mention, this one here, equip laws of strong items, just be careful. Depending on the situation, if you don't have very good items, don't worry about it too much. You don't always have to fuse them. It's not essential, but some items can be really good for sure. It just depends on luck. Army composition. Build balanced armies. Mixed infantry, frontline, ranged units damage, cavalry flankers, mobility, and artillery monsters specialized roles. No. Okay, so look, build balanced armies if you want to build them. But if your goal here is to get good at Total Warhammer 3, this is bad advice. This is such a prevailing myth, and I don't know why this is still going on. Because Total War Warhammer 3 has asymmetrical factions, so it would be natural that building balanced armies in a game that favors asymmetry is probably a bad idea. Also, the best way to handle the AI is to do things that they don't understand how to deal with. And I guess you could also call that AI abuse, and maybe that's why Grok is not trying to teach you how to abuse the AI. Maybe I'll ask Grok, how do I exploit Grok? We'll see what happens. But basically, if you build a balanced army, the AI will look at it, go, bang, bingo, I know exactly what to do here because this is what I've been trained to do. Whereas if you build weird armies, they'll go, what the fuck is this? And they'll start doing weird shit, and you'll be able to point out their weaknesses very easily. So this is why you'll see so many weird doom stacks and why they can be effective, and why some other doom stacks that don't take that stuff into consideration generally perform very badly. So you also want to build your armies based on your faction's strengths, not necessarily your enemy's weakness. So, for example, let's just say we're playing as Bretonnia here, and you've got the mindset of build balanced armies. So you're building some crappy spears, you're building some peasant archers, and then you've got some knights errant and maybe knights of the realm. Maybe that's the way you've got it, right? The problem with that army is that you've built weaknesses into your forces, because Bretonnia has infantry that's worse than just about every other faction in the game, excluding maybe Skaven. So their infantry is their weakness. Putting them as a frontline unit, they're not good frontline units. You basically need another unit to support them, just so that they can support the unit that's behind them. So instead, just ignore this unit type entirely because it's badly designed. So if you're going to use Bretonnia, for example, what works best for them is actually splitting your armies up into 2 armies and having one focus on ranged units and the other one focus on cavalry. You have the cavalry one show up on the battlefield first and fucking annoy the hell out of the enemy army that's there, and then tell your archers to show up because you can move your army location wherever they're going to be able to find a good defensive position after you've completely and thoroughly pissed off the enemy, so they're going to make really bad decisions attacking your archers. That's an example, because Bretonnia doesn't have supply lines. Rather than having one army, like I'm talking about like 2 armies, like two lords with half an army each, doing that and like delaying your reinforcements from showing up, because then the enemy just can't hit you because you're not stationary. They can't execute their will. That's what you want to be doing with the enemy. You want to make it so that they cannot do what they want to do. They get frustrated and they kind of give up after about 5 minutes. It's kind of weird. So yeah, this is really bad advice. Again, if you want to get good at the game. This is if you want to have fun at the game, by all means build balanced armies. But just keep in mind that building balanced armies requires more skill to use, so it's going to be harder to do. And the results that you can achieve with a balanced army are nowhere near as good as what you can achieve with an unbalanced armies. Like, there's pretty much no balanced army in the game that's going to be able to take on like 4 full stacks of endgame crisis greenskins and walk out unscathed. This is not going to happen. But there is army builds that you can make that have 4 units in them that can absolutely dumpster all over those greenskins, because this is nothing that the greenskins can do about it, because you've got 3 units that are just like stationary tanks, like two heroes and maybe another type of single entity, I don't know. And then the other one's a wizard. They can't catch the wizard, and the wizard just bombs the entire area with so much magic and destroys 4 full stacks without it being able to do anything. So this mindset here, I mean, obviously I'm using late game stuff. This can be really this can be okay in the early stage of the campaign, but really bad as you start to progress beyond it because of the asymmetry of every faction. Now, there are factions that that have a bit more balanced build. So, for example, dwarves. Dwarves are a faction that really don't have any weaknesses. So, yeah, going mixed infantry, ranged cavalry. Well, they don't have cavalry, so that's their asymmetry. That's fine for the dwarves because of their slow-moving stuff, right? But use the example of Bretonnia. Just avoid melee infantry. If you're playing as high elves, for example, you actually want to be avoiding their cavalry. Just don't bother recruiting them. Because you also need to consider what it's going to cost you on the campaign map in order to get them. It requires a separate building. Your best unit is available from a regular building from the main settlement, which is just basic archers. And just spamming out those archers is fine. Like, if you're like, oh, but the enemy have got some cavalry. Well, then just kill them before they get close, or use the heroes to snipe them. But we've seen so many times how like an all-archer army can absolutely demolish superior forces or superior numbers as long as you position them correctly. That being said, there are certain situations where it can completely fail on you. So you've got to be able to identify that kind of stuff. But yeah, having the idea of just building a balanced army. Warhammer 3 is not designed for that to work well for the player, just fundamentally. So this, in my opinion, is bad advice to if you want to be good at the game. This is if you want to have fun at the game. I really want to make that distinction. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Example for Empire. Use handgunners with halberdiers to hold the line, mortars for area damage, and cavalry to hit enemy ranged units. Who are you fighting, as an example? Probably vampire accounts. So, what ranged units? You got to take that kind of stuff into consideration. Are you fighting against greenskins? What ranged units? Like, their ranged units are nothing to really be too concerned about. Halberdiers have fairly low leadership, so you need to have a hero there to hold the line. Wouldn't it just be better to have more guns or more overlapping fields of fire? In some cases, maybe. It just depends. And also, when you have armies like this, you constantly need to replace your front line because they're the ones that are going to get obliterated. Whereas you're going to have lopsided casualties, basically. Just depends on how you want to go about it. But typically, like, Empire is one of those factions that you definitely... It's fine to go balanced armies. It's just not the best way to go about it by any means. Tailor armies to counter enemies. Armor-piercing units versus chaos-heavily armored units. No. You don't tailor your armies to counter enemies. You tailor your armies to your faction, basically. Whatever your faction is good at, that's what you want to be recruiting. So, for example, if you're playing as, let's say you're playing as the Empire and you're deciding to go up against Bretonnia, and you're like, well, I'm about to go up against Bretonnia, I better recruit loads of spearmen. But your spearmen are shit, and their cavalry are going to still beat you, so don't do that. Basically, guns are still the way to go, because you've got guns and they don't. Focus on your strengths, not necessarily the enemy weaknesses, because the enemy, their weaknesses... They've got many of them. You'll find a different weakness. And oftentimes the weakness is based on the behavior, not necessarily the stats. So you just need to... Also, another thing is that if an enemy has a particularly strong unit, the best way to deal with it is just avoid it because of the army loss penalty. Basically, if you can just inflict 78% of the enemy's balance of power and damage, the game will just adjudicate you a win as long as you haven't suffered, say, half of your balance of power and damage. So lots of different ways to go about it, but just main thing to keep in mind, and this all takes a lot of practice, I suppose, is that having rigid mindsets in Total War Warhammer 3 is very bad. Okay, so being like, I have to build a balanced army. No, you don't. Don't have to build a balanced army. Asymmetry. The game has lots of asymmetry. If you lean into it, you can get better results out of it. That being said, if you lean into it badly, you can get terrible results out of it. Like, Legend of Total War told me to recruit all archers, and then I went up against Bretonnia, and they charged into my archers, and I lost. Well, yeah, that's gonna happen. You know, that's what's gonna happen. You got to prepare for those sort of scenarios as well. So again, use the asymmetry to your advantage, and try to avoid where it's not going to be to your advantage. Like, don't pick fights with factions that your asymmetry is not going to work in your favor. Tactical basics: use terrain, place ranged units on hills, hide cavalry in forests, funnel enemies into choke points. Yeah, I mean, that's all basic stuff for the most part. Just be careful about putting range units on hills, because sometimes high ground can actually be a disadvantage due to the bumpy terrain of Total War Warhammer 3. Just takes practice. Check their line of sight. Make sure there's not a hill sitting in front of them. even if they are on high ground. Look for gentle slopes because it'll be easier to track. Basically, what you want there is placed ranged units in clean line of sight. That's the most important thing, even if that means at the bottom of a hill. Clean line of sight is more important than high ground but obstructed line of sight. Hide cavalry in forest, hiding lots of units in forest can be really handy, and funneling enemies into choke points sometimes can be handy. You just got to be careful because sometimes what the enemy can do, depends on what you're going up against. Let's just say you've got a choke point battle and the enemy is filled with high mass monsters. Let's just say you're going up against a Rite of Primeval Glory army. Do not, under any circumstance, put your fucking basic human troops in the choke point. Because do you think those halberdiers are going to do anything more than just be like a little stopgap for those monsters? They're going to just jump onto you as like Super Mario jumping onto a Goomba and then just go straight to your missile units. What you want to do is go off to the side and just let them funnel in and be like, well, why aren't they here? And then you just get more opportunity to shoot them that way. You do not want them thinking that they need to bulldoze through you. That being said, if you're going up against low mass units, let's just say loads of Skaven, then sure, by all means block the choke point. Unless, of course, they've got poison wind mortars, or even worse, the avalanche mortars, in which case, spread your fucking units out as far as you bloody well can and avoid that piece of shit, because it'll kill you very easily. Anyway, flank with fast units, cavalry flyers to disrupt enemy ranged units or artillery. Yep, absolutely. Also, wasting enemy ammo is another one, but obviously it's not going to teach you about that. Protect your lord. Losing them causes army-wide morale penalties. Look, honestly, losing the army-wide morale penalties is not that big of a deal. It does happen. I would say if your lord is looking pretty damaged, it's fine to withdraw them from the battlefield. You'll suffer a temporary leadership penalty. But the most important thing is that they don't die, because however many levels you've invested into them, well, that goes to waste. You're going to start again, essentially. Also, same thing with equipment. They lose that with it as well. But that being said, just because it says protect your lord, more like don't get your lord killed, but you should be risking your lord in every single battle, because that's how you're going to get results. If you want to be good at the game, you need to learn how to risk your lord, and sometimes they're going to get killed. But if you know what you're doing, most of the time they won't. That's how you're going to get really good results. But don't be like, well, Karl Franz the Emperor, I better keep him at the very rear of the army. I don't want him getting hurt at all. That's very bad advice to do that. Use control groups, control plus number, to manage units efficiently, e.g. group all archers together. I would say use control groups on units you need to switch back and forth with very quickly. Usually like single entities, for example, ones that are spellcasters. Archers I usually wouldn't put into a control group, because usually you're putting them into a control group so you can select them quickly so you can give them an order. Archers are not a unit that you want to be giving a lot of orders to. You want them to be set up and just let them shoot at their own devices. Ideally, obviously sometimes the enemy are coming at you with units you don't want to shoot at and you have to use them manually. But there's a problem with targeting in Warhammer 3 and line of sight. And basically, if you give a missile unit, an attack order, there's a decent chance that they're going to start just walking towards that unit because they're like, I can't see it, and then they just walk forward. Whereas if they just fire at will, they'll just forget about that unit that they can't see and they'll shoot at something else that they can see. So you just got to be very careful with what units that you're constantly commanding, especially with artillery. And you'll see this happen to me all the time whenever I give mass orders, just because shit hits the fan. And you'll see my artillery be like, I got to go after that unit. And it's walking towards something because there's a ditch in the way or something along those lines. So yeah, control groups can definitely be helpful for sure. It can also be useful to use as camera, especially when you're playing on restricted camera movement, so you can't just go anywhere on the map. To get between two, like if you've got fights in two different locations, use the control groups to get back and forth between them without having to deal with the restrict camera bullshit. Magic and abilities. Learn your faction spellcasters and laws of magic. For example, fire magic, burning head is great for crowd control, while life excels at healing. Well, actually, life magic is really good at killing people as well with what's it called, Dwellers Below. Again, learn your factions. We'll learn what magic is good, but yeah, there are typically laws of magic that are better than others. Burning Head, for example, not particularly good against armored units, really good at taking out low tier chaff. If you're dealing with armored units, then you want to go Flamestorm. But yeah, for sure. Also, with the control group stuff there, especially if you're fairly new to it and your micro's not that good, try to only leave a couple of control groups. Like, don't make 8 or 9 control groups. You're not going to be able to manage that. It's just going to be too much. Try to keep the engagements as small as possible. Otherwise, you'll just fumble over yourself. Micromanage casters to maximize wins of magic usage. Don't spam spells early unless you can secure kills. Yeah, I mean, this seems obvious, I guess. Use Lord's Heroes abilities. Yeah, I mean, if you got abilities, use them. This is just like, it's kind of like this. I don't think this is particularly valuable to anyone. It's kind of like saying, oh, if you've got ammunition, you should use it. Okay, all right, let's just move on. Let's not spend too much time on that. Battle pace. Pause, PK, or slow down, Control T. I don't even know about that. During battles to issue precise orders, especially in large engagements. Yeah. So if you're new at the game, yeah, this is very handy. I've been playing Legendary difficulty for so long that I forget that I can even pause the battles these days. So this is why sometimes you'll see a comment, how come you never use slow-mo or pause the battle? I forget it even is there, because on Legendary difficulty, you're just not allowed to do it. So yeah, by all means, early stages of the campaign, early stages of learning how to play the game, very useful, but use it when you're overwhelmed. Don't use it as like a crutch every single battle. If you eventually want to play Legendary difficulty, you've got to get out of this habit. So only use it as like a last ditch effort. Like if you manage to win the battle without it, do that. But if you can't win the battle without it, then use it. Try that. I think you'll eventually, as you play the game, you'll eventually learn not to use it, and the battles will feel more satisfying, in my opinion. Focus fire on high value targets, enemy lords, monsters to break their army's morale. No. This could be very ineffective to do this. No. High value, what it really should be saying is focus fire on high damage targets, not high value. So we'll use the example of the vampire counts, because this is probably going to be one of the most prevalent situations with this. So let's just say Vlad von Carstein is coming at you, and you've got a balanced army. You've got some handgunners, you're playing as Norn, whatever. And Vlad's coming at you. He's at the front of his army, and you're like, I got a clear line of sight on Vlad. All guns firing on Vlad. Probably a bad idea, because what will probably end up happening is the moment you start shooting at him, you use the von Carstein ring, take a whole bunch of damage reduction, and just regenerate whatever damage you do to him. And of course, the rest of his army is advancing while it's going on. Now, Vlad is one of those cases where it can be very difficult for the player. Ideally, you want to lure Vlad away so that you just don't have to deal with him until the end of the battle, because he's relatively slow. If he's got Flock of Doom, you definitely want to be spread out so he doesn't cast that too often. But if he's just in melee with Chaff, what you do is you take that melee unit, whatever he's fighting, or whatever unit, it doesn't have to be a melee unit, whatever unit he is trying to fight, take it and just run away. Just tell that unit to go away and lure him away, because he'll usually keep chasing after it. And while units are chasing after another unit, they tend not to do as much damage, and just move them out of the way. What you want to be dealing with, because Vlad in melee doesn't dish out shitloads of damage to infantry units. He dishes out loads of damage to single entities. So don't be like, oh, I better send my Empire Captain to go fight Vlad. No, your Empire Captain's going to die. That's not a good idea. So if his army's rolling towards you, and there's Vargeists in the air, for example, shoot them. If there's bats in the air, shoot them. If there's Crypt Horrors on the way, shoot them. These are kind of low value units, but they're high damage. They're also easy to kill. So you want to be focusing fire on whatever you're going to be able to either stop them from dishing out shitloads of damage to you. Like, for example, if there's a Mortis engine coming towards you, that thing will cause a shitload of damage. Shoot the fuck out of that. It's not damage resistant at all. It'll die very quickly. But yeah, high value, that can be misinterpreted as like the enemy lord. Like, it doesn't matter if you drop the morale of the vampire army by 10 by killing Vlad, but it spent all of your forces to do that, and then the rest of his army just finishes you off. Like, that leadership penalty that suffers doesn't matter at all. You want to be taking out, like I said, the high damage targets, or wherever you're going to be able to inflict the most amount of damage. Like, if the enemy have a huge blob of skeletons in one area, and this is a hypothetical, that's probably not going to happen, but just as an example, thought experiment, they've got a huge blob of skeletons in one area, and then they've got one isolated grave guard that's max tier experience in another area, but it's like all by itself and kind of spread out. Use your Hellstorm rocket battery or magic to hit the big blob of skeletons. Be like, but those are lower tier units. Yeah, but you're going to kill way more of them. It's going to make it way more valuable than trying to hit a pin from like that distance. The bigger the blob, the more damage. If you're inaccurate, you're still going to hit something, sort of thing. So wherever you can see yourself inflicting the most amount of damage, because what you can do is if there's certain units that are just too difficult to deal with, you can try to dish out damage to everything else and just pray that you get the army loss penalty inflicted on them, like adjudicating a win, and the game will just kill off those other units and be like, okay, you did pretty well, so there you go, get rid of those other ones that you were struggling with. So Vlad is one of those examples that is most often killed by army lossing him, just because he regenerates so much health and he's so tanky. Just as a general rule of thumb. So avoid auto-resolving unless you have overwhelming odds. Manual battles often yield better results with fewer losses, unless you are playing on easy battle difficulty. But you shouldn't play on easy battle difficulty because it has a psychological effect on players that's really detrimental, unless you're aware of it, and the game doesn't tell you about it, by the way. A lot of players will start their campaigns on easy battle difficulty. A battle will begin and be like, decisive victory in auto-resolve, and then you fight the battle manually, and it says close victory or Pyrrhic victory, and be like, oh man, I suck, I'm worse than auto-resolve. But what's really happening is that the auto-resolve is giving you a 300% modifier on your army's strength, which isn't translated onto the manual field battle. You actually did pretty well. It's just that the auto-resolve is full of bullshit, basically. Play on hard battle difficulty, because it won't really affect the AI too much on the battlefield. It really doesn't make a big difference. And instead, if you want to have an advantage over them, put the AI cheats at minimum. That's the better way to do it, because the AI cheats won't affect the auto-resolve, so it won't have a psychological effect on you. And believe it or not, psychological effect, it does actually matter. There's been a lot of people that have fucking quit out of playing the game because of the psychological effect of winning every battle in auto-resolve, but being unable to win any battles manually. Being like, just turning off the game because they think it's shit. Just because of one poorly explained, poorly designed aspect of it. It has happened. Then we've got general tips. Learn from losses. Save frequently, manual saves, not disorder saves, to experiment with different strategies. Yep, this is very good in the early stage of the campaign. Obviously, if you're playing legendary difficulty with Iron Man mode, you can't do this without certain cheese. But yeah, this is definitely good advice I would give. Like, it's totally fine, I think, as a bit of an experiment when learning. Do a scenario, play it out, and then load up the save file and do it again a bit differently and see how things could have been done differently. You'd be surprised how like creative you can be when you're taking risks, knowing you've got that safety net. And you can come up with some really interesting techniques. Like, most of my techniques came from doing something like that. Difficulty settings. Start on normal or hard campaign difficulty to learn mechanics without being overwhelmed. Battle difficulty can stay at normal to focus on campaign mastery. This is good advice here. I see how it didn't say easy difficulty. Good. I was wondering if it was going to mention that. Higher difficulty is very hard legendary. Will require min-maxing economy and exploiting AI weaknesses, e.g. baiting ambushes. Pretty much. Yeah. Exploiting AI weaknesses, I mean, that's... Yeah. I mean, isn't that just what strategy is, really? I mean, when it came to historical, like, actual real-world battles, I mean, they would exploit their enemy's stupidity, baiting them into, like, crossing a river or coming at them while they hadn't had breakfast or something like that. So, I mean, it's just that the AI is... It's just very, very prone to that kind of stuff, that's all. But they're given loads of resources, lots of like extra money and recruitment capabilities to sort of compensate for that. So you've got to work with what you've got, which is a brain, and they work with what they've got, which is resources. Use resources. Watch YouTubers like Legend of Total War and Zerkovich for faction-specific guides. I did not know that they were going to say that. But yeah, that's... Obviously, I would agree with that. No, Zerkovich is also a great one that will provide very good advice for when you're new at the game. Probably more focusing on the balance. Like if you've sat here, you probably would have turned off the video at this point. If I had said about the not using balanced armies, and that had upset you, it'd be like, no, I want to use balanced armies. Then you should probably go and check out Zerkovich. He'll teach you how to use balanced armies, because I'm not going to teach you how to use balanced armies at all, because I don't think you should. I think the game is specifically geared to fuck balanced armies. On the campaign map, the AI is designed to screw you over. And I think that I enjoy the game by not letting it fuck me, basically. So I don't lean into these player traps, and balanced armies, like all these places be like telling you, build balanced armies, build balanced army. No, don't do it. It's asymmetrical factions with asymmetrical armies. Lean into asymmetry. Don't build balance. Don't build symmetry. It's bad in this game. In other Total War games, it can be good, but in Total War Warhammer, in most cases, symmetry is bad. Balanced army is bad. But yeah, Zerkovich will help you out with those balanced builds for sure. Check Steam guides, all the Total War forums, up-to-date strategies, especially for Immortal Empires. to varying degrees. Keep an open mind. Don't use any guide as like a you must do this, because there's loads of different ways to play the game. And if you end up with a rigid mindset, it might not work for you, and you may end up not enjoying it or not picking it up quite as well. And if you stick to a guide too much, you might not be open to other possibilities. So just my advice to it is lose campaigns. Be okay with losing a campaign. You will learn more from losing than you will from winning. So just go and lose. It's okay. You know, everybody loses, except for me. I'm just kidding. Everybody loses. It's fine. Defeat is the best teacher. But you know, check guides if you run into a roadblock and be like, oh, how do I beat Tamara Khan with using dwarf miners? The answer is you can't. You cannot. The asymmetry is just too far gone, basically. So that would be a case where you ask a question, you should be able to get an answer. Experiment with mods via Steam Workshop, better camera mod for improved battle control, recruit defeated legendary lords for added flavor. This has got nothing to do with being good at the game. This is about having fun. So download those mods if you want, but that's got nothing to do with it. Practice micro and macro. Practice battles and custom battles to test army compositions and tactics without campaign consequences. No! No. How can you practice how to fight battles in campaign if there are no campaign consequences? You can't do it. Every fucking battle in the campaign has consequences. Every single one of them. I'm just trying to think if there are some that actually don't have consequences. No, every single battle has a consequence. The thing is with custom battles is that there is no consequence to the battles. Do not do this. Practice battles and custom battles if you want to test army compositions for multiplayer, because those have no consequences. But no, practice your campaign battles in your fucking campaigns. If you want to test out a unit and see its functionality and how it works, that's fine. But do not test out army builds in custom battle, because there's so much context to the campaign, right? Because when you take a custom battle, let's just say you're in the campaign, you're going to go up against the coordinate factions. You'd be like, oh, I'm going to practice this in a custom battle. Well, the custom battle is going to take into consideration whether or not they're going to have Summon from Beyond, for example, or whether Scarbrand is level 50, or whether their heroes are able to summon units. It's not going to have any of that campaign context. And so this is completely fucking useless in those scenarios. So what you want to do is deal with it on the campaign map. Save your game, deal with it, and learn from it. And if you lose, it's okay. You'll do better next time, hopefully. But yeah, this is very bad advice. It's basically like training to pick apples by picking pears. I don't know. It's not the same thing. I don't know. I don't know anything about picking apples or pears. I use a bad analogy. But yeah, I wouldn't advise this at all. I've literally never done this to practice for campaign consequences. So this is extraordinarily bad advice. Focus on one or two factions initially, High Elves or Empire. No, Empire is not a beginner faction, not at all. High Elves, Tyrion is, not Teclis. The Empire has got a lot of dangerous enemies and a lot of mechanics to juggle, whereas the High Elves kind of don't. They're actually quite simple. Well, Tyrion specifically got quite simple scenarios to deal with. Also doesn't have as many like really powerful enemies close by. So yes to this and no to that. By all means, play Karl Franz if you want to play him, but for the similar levels of difficulty, I would say that hard difficulty or as Tyrion is equivalent to probably very hard for Tyrion would be the equivalent of normal difficulty for Reichland, as an example. So if you're the first time playing, you're like, oh, but I really want to play Karl Franz, then play on easy campaign difficulty, because Empire is not for beginners. This is very bad advice here to master their playstyle before branching out. So faction-specific starting tips. High Elves, Tyrion, focus on trade and diplomacy, use archers and dragons for versatile armies. Archers, yes. Dragons, no. So, yeah, that's weird that it said that. Like, I'm not saying don't use dragons, but you use dragons when you're comfortable. You don't use it to win. Like, you get dragons as a reward for winning the campaign. You don't use dragons to win the campaign, because dragons are prohibitively expensive. by the time you get them, you should have essentially won the campaign. They're also very, very late in the campaign sort of thing. Plus, you need a lot of support for them. They need, life magic and all the kind of stuff to support them. Or it's like a last ditch effort crutch, like the Sword of Cain, for example. But yeah, archers are exceptionally good. So regular archers, don't get the ones with light armor. They're waste of money, basically. But their stats are better. It doesn't matter. Their upkeep cost is higher as well. And they gain stats in areas that they don't need. You just want to. In fact, having low like defenses for archer units can actually be a good thing because it lowers their balance of power and probably lowers their upkeep costs. Having like elite archers that are like really good at everything can actually be a big detriment, especially when you've got limited ammunition. A big example of that is actually like Celestial Dragon crossbowmen. Sometimes spamming those units can actually be really bad if you go up against lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of goblins, because they'll run out of ammunition killing shit and then they won't beat them in melee afterwards, just because they get overwhelmed. So you just got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the game, I guess. But yeah, a bit weird saying archers and dragons. By all means, get whatever units you want, but don't rely on dragons to win your campaign. Empire Karl Franz, unite Reichland early, confederate other elect accounts, and use artillery-heavy armies. I agree with use artillery-heavy armies. I agree with that. Confederate other elect accounts? No. 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 You don't want to do that because the elect accounts act as buffer states. And every time you confederate an elect account, guess what? You'll encounter another major enemy. So, for example, if you confederate Nordland, guess who you're going to encounter? Wulfric the Wanderer. Do you think the amount of territory you get from Nordland is going to be able to repel, give you enough money to be able to repel Wulfric the Wanderer? No. If you go and confederate Ostland, guess who you're going to encounter? Azazel. If you go and confederate Ostland, you're going to encounter probably Throp the Unclean, Dryka, and Azag. So yeah, this is not good advice at all. Unite Reichland early? Nah. That's not what you want to do. Like with Karl Franz, he has the ability to walk across neutral territory and replenish and without diplomatic penalty. What you want to be doing early is destroy the enemies of the Empire early. Take out the Secessionists, take out the Beastmen, Kazrak. Then you want to kill. It depends on what is your most pressing urgent need. Sometimes it's Heinrich Kemmler, sometimes it's Festus, sometimes it's Vlad. Most of the times it's Festus, I think. Kill them. And if that means giving some of that territory back to elect accounts, so be it. Probably best not to revive an elect account unless it comes with a legendary lord, such as semi-legendary lord Boris Todbringer, or Wissenland and Norn. Usually Wissenland and Norn will survive. But another thing you can do is try to ally with Wissenland and Norn and work together to secure the Empire. Just make sure that the Empire is owned by Empire factions and kick out anyone. Deport the non-Empire factions, basically. Because, yeah, they cause you to lose Imperial authority. But you don't need to have a lot of territory personally owned by you. And then once the Empire is secure, then start uniting the elect accounts then. Because you'll secure a lot of prestige, and also you'll level up your mechanic, I forget what it's called, your Zinchian changing of the ways cheats, and it'll be easier and cheaper to confederate the elect accounts later on. So yeah, this is bad advice here. Bad advice. Skaven, quick. Expand underground with Under Empire, use cheap infantry to swarm, and rely on artillery plague claw catapults. I would say with any Skaven, it's not about what units you use, it's about how often you ambush. If you're using cheap infantry to swarm, that is useless if the enemy forces have melee focus. So if you're going up against greenskins, this is terrible advice. If you're going up against dwarves, it's only good if you ambush them so that you can eat their missile units and artillery, because you're not going to take out their iron breakers or anything like that. Plague claw catapults are pretty much good in all situations, so yeah, they're really good to have. Orcs Grimgore, fight constantly for WAR bonuses, use high damage infantry and monsters. Yeah, that's pretty much it. With Grimgore, just smash. Maybe don't take on Tsar Nagron on turn 2. Probably good advice. People used to be able to do it when you could like reinforce from their capture location, but you can't do it anymore. Immortal Empire's focus. In Immortal Empires, the massive campaign map requires long-term planning. No, it doesn't. Secure your strategy price. Sorry. This is like, no, it absolutely doesn't. I'm done with my campaigns on turn 30 in the vast majority of the cases. You do not need to have long-term plans. You need to have a short-term plan, and you need to adjust it every single fucking time you make a decision. You need to be thinking 5 turns in advance, and every time you make a turn, you need to adjust that plan every single time. Long-term plans is thinking too far in advance. I mean, obviously, by saying planning 5 things in advance, I don't know. Have a long-term goal by all means, but don't be rigid about it. Don't be like, well, as Reichland, I have to take out Vlad by turn 10. You don't have to. If there's other things going on, don't worry about that. So short-term, focus on whatever is the most pressing issue. You can have more long-term plans when you've got the resources to be able to enact your will, no problem. Secure your starting province quickly, then target key landmarks, Altdorf's Imperial Palace for Empire. Yes and no. In the case of the Empire, yes, but there's some factions where you actually want to forget about your starting province because it's actually shit, and just migrate elsewhere, and it's actually not that important to secure your starting province. Use another example, Bretonia. Bretonia, you're set to go and like capture your home. I forgot what it's called. Your home province, not Corone, the other settlement in that province. Like on turn 1, but it's actually not pressing because the vampires are a lot easier to deal with than the greenskins. So in fact, it's actually better to go after No, don't go after Marienburg. You go after Grung Zint orcs first. You actually get a better opportunity because that wipes out that faction completely. Because other Bretonian factions will fight against the vampires, and the vampires will take a long time to get their shit organized anyway. So you get rid of the orcs first, and then you swing back around, and then you get rid of the vampires. It's a bit of a trick start. So it's not always the case that you need to secure your starting province early. Remember, go for whatever is the most pressing issue early. Watch for Chaos Rift spawning. Close them. Realms of Chaos campaign, don't play that campaign. Prioritize confederating legendary laws to unify your factions and unlock unique units. It doesn't unlock unique units by doing that, by the way. You don't get access. Like, for example, if you're playing as Tyrion and you confederate Eltharion, that will not automatically grant you Mistwalker units. You'll only get the Mistwalker units that he has recruited at the time of confederation. But also, prioritizing confederating legendary lords, let's elaborate a little bit on that. Sometimes a confederation can totally fuck you over, especially if that confederation was with a faction you're allied to, because sometimes an allied faction is a pretty actually useful ally and is actually expanding against your enemies as well. And what you can do is, when that ally is of no further use to you whatsoever, then confederate them. But if they're of current military use to you and you don't desperately need their lands or their armies, by all means, hold off on it, because if they're leveling up their lords badly, well, you just respec them. It's no big deal. So just be a bit mindful of this. I've seen situations where people have confederated with someone else and it's totally fucked their campaign up because they ended up with a whole bunch of shit territory because the AI built nothing but military buildings. All their armies are dog shit. So all their income went into the red. Their public orders in the red, and they made next to no money in all their territory, and then ended up having to give away half the territory that they confederated in order to get it. That being said as well, sometimes a confederation with the intent purpose of selling all of the territory off to somebody else that you're going to confederate again later is actually quite useful. So again, it's not about confederating the territory or the legendary lords. Just think about it from a strategic point of view. What are you going to do once you've confederated that territory, and who are you going to border the moment that you do that? So just be mindful of it. If you've already completely surrounded it, by all means, just get the extra legendary lord. Also, another thing to consider is the legendary lord's global bonuses. So, as an example, if you're playing as the dwarves, confederating Grombrindle early on that's like one of the higher priorities, because Grombrindle in his blue line provides replenishment, campaign movement range for your armies, recruit rank, recruitment cost, global recruitment, loads of global bonuses. Whereas confederating Ungrim provides no global bonuses whatsoever. He's just like, I'm a really strong fighter. But that being said, he's about as strong as Grombrindle anyway. So, taking these things into consideration is important. There are some factions that don't have that much versatility in global bonuses. But anyway, that seems to be all of it. Honestly, it's not too bad of a guide there, but obviously a few things I very much disagreed with. Let me ask it another question. How do I break the AI of Grok 3? He's probably not going to be telling me. No answer. Okay, fair enough. Well, that's the end of this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope that this sort of came as a bit of a guide for you. And at the end of the day, if you disagree with anything that I've said here, and if you don't like anything that I've said here, don't do it. Nobody's forcing you to play anyway. I'm just telling you how I think it works to be good at the game by understanding the flaws in the game, but also understanding the asymmetry of it, and also understanding the AI. Because the best way to overcome your opponent is to understand your opponent, and the best way to defeat your opponent is to have them fall on their own sword. And that's the mindset that I use for it. And I get that some people don't want to do that. They'll be like, no, I want to actually fight them in a fair fight. By all means, go and do that, but you'll never get the results that I get. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, that's in this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time. Later, guys.